Hello out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast. I'm Caleb, and I'm joined by Alan. This is the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals, and we got a big ball game tomorrow. South Carolina is playing in the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville versus the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That is at 3:30.
3:30
3:30
ESPN.
On ESPN, 3:30 Eastern. So very short. Before we get into that fully, though, I do want to just really quickly go over recruiting, which is what we usually do at the top of the podcast. Last time we talked to you, I was in a Starbucks. It was miserable. Glad to not be there right now. Sorry, Starbucks. It's nothing against you. It's just, maybe turn the holiday music down a little bit.
Got good acoustics in my Jacksonville hotel room here. I think we're doing okay.
So yeah, last time we talked, we kind of gave you a long list of tight end names that we kind of were trying to tell you were coming, but didn't. We let people have their moment and all that. So since then, we've the tight end room seemed empty, and it's very much not empty anymore. So you had Reed McCaska, who's a 2023 recruit, highly sought after, flipped initially from Clemson to Miami, now flipped from Miami to South Carolina, and sent in his official NLI, National Letter of Intent, last week. So that is a done deal. You also had Trey Knox, Arkansas tight end, who we speculated might follow his position coach, Dow Loggins, to South Carolina, and he made that official. And then yesterday, we also had tight end Joshua Simon, who holds the single season record at Western Kentucky for receiving touchdowns after a pretty prolific year in that department this year, also announcing that he is transferring to South Carolina. So ultimately, you add that on to Nick Elskins, you add that on to, which was the Florida transfer that we talked about last week. You add that on to Cameron Sandlin. You add that on to Connor Cox. You add that on to the potential of a Nicholas Harbor, who I'm going to talk a little bit more about here in a second. It's arguable that the tight end room is in better shape now than it would have been had Stogner and Gene Bell stuck around. At the very least, I don't think that there's a huge drop-off, which is what people were dooming and glooming about whenever both those guys announced their transfer.
They kind of did a rebuild on the fly there. It's kind of the way I'd put it. Yeah, obviously you're losing Adkins too after the bowl game. He's the one here still going to play, but you're down all four of those guys with Adkinian in. And yeah, it's a rebuild on the fly. You've got obviously the guys in the class, the recruiting class you just mentioned coming in. And Nicholas Harbor would change everything, of course. That immediately changes the way you feel about the tight end room and just really the recruiting class in general, I think. But yeah, I think they're going to be fine there. It's not the list of pressing concerns about the 2023 roster, which I'm sure we'll do that in another show another time in January. But I don't think tight end is anywhere near it might have been 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, but it's not now. I don't think it's even close to the top of that list anymore, which is a credit to the staff and probably Dow Loggins too, let's face it, for helping to rebuild that pretty quickly.
Definitely. They're still going to have to get creative in the bowl game, which we'll talk about here in a second. But it looks like they're set up pretty well for next season. Some other recruiting notes. Lenora Sellers, who we talked a little bit about last week, 2023 quarterback that was committed to Syracuse through most of the process for like a year and a half or so, flipped at the last minute on Friday to South Carolina. That's after getting offered by South Carolina in October. The staff really did a good job of making up lost ground there. My initial concern was just that they had kind of waited too late to make that offer, and Syracuse had shown him that he was a priority early and often or whatever. But the South Carolina convinced him that they're trying their best to keep the best players in state at home in every recruiting class, and it was obvious that Lenore Sellers was one of the best high school players in the state of South Carolina this past year. He won the MVP of the Shrine Bowl, leading the South over the North.
Won a state title game too.
Yeah, exactly, and put up like an absurd stat line in the state title game. I can't remember the specifics, but I believe it was like 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns.
They put up like 60 points in that game against Northwestern High School. Yeah.
And then he ran for another 200 yards and a couple touchdowns. So just absurd athlete. I don't know how he's going to fit into a very crowded quarterback room. But
yeah, how do you? I guess that's kind of the other point here. There's still a Rattler decision to be made, which we're going to talk about later. He addressed that again today. You got Luke Doty there. Tanner Bailey, by all accounts, has really shot up and done well as a freshman. He's on the travel roster. He's by all accounts QB3 now after coming in being like 4 or 5. Colton Gauthier is still here. Who am I missing? Braden Davis still here. And then you've got Lenora Sellers and Dante Reno's in the pipeline behind him. So, and Jalen Daniels. Yeah. So it's a lot there. You would expect something to move there at some point. It's just, there's too many cooks in the kitchen, I would think. But I would imagine whatever dominoes are falling there probably come after Spencer Rattler makes his decision, I would assume.
Definitely. It's a good problem to have, but you're right that something's going to have to give eventually. There's too much talent in that room. But, you just got to hope that you keep people with the same mission long enough to kind of figure out who those top 1 or 2 guys are. And then for better or worse, I mean, it's better for the individuals too, to have them move on and go, figure it out somewhere else or whatever. But like I said, good problem to have. A lot of talent in that room right now. Couple more recruiting notes. Many of you may have noticed on Rivals commitment list, which is very easy to access if you go to GamecocksGroup.com, hit recruiting at the top. The drop-down has commitment list. The only recruit of the 23 commits that South Carolina has that did not sign in the early signing period was Xavion Hardy, or Zay Hardy. And we kind of told you what was going on there on the Insiders Forum. You can read more about that if you want to look back. But basically, there was a clearinghouse issue. The last word from Xavion Hardy, so this is what Rivals got straight from the horse's mouth or whatever, was that he got cleared on Christmas Day, is what he says, and that he's planning to sign in February. That he's still totally solid, all that. So we'll see if that plays out that way. We kind of have heard a couple of different things about what's going on behind the scenes there. But what we do know for sure is that he is completely solid with South Carolina, and that he is planning on signing with South Carolina eventually. And the timeline right now looks like February. Mentioned Joshua Simon. The other note that we briefly mentioned is Nicholas Harbor, who is the biggest remaining recruit on the board for South Carolina for several teams. One of the biggest recruits remaining on the board. I feel
like you've been saying that since about August, that he's the biggest one left on the board.
Yeah. He just announced through a Rivals exclusive interview with Adam Friedman, that he is taking a official visit to Oregon. That's in addition to his top 3 right now. Not an official top 3, but we kind of all think that the top 3 is Maryland, Michigan, and South Carolina. The thing that Maryland and Oregon both have to offer here that I think is an interesting to kind of keep in mind is the money, and also because he has dreams, like Olympic dreams, of being a track athlete in addition to playing football. I think both of those companies, Nike being associated with Oregon, Under Armour being associated with Maryland, it'll be interesting to see if at the end of the day anything NIL wise sort of plays out there, because again, if he truly is this 2-sport future Olympian, which he has that sort of potential, it could be smart for either of those companies to kind of get in early there. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. I don't want to speculate too much. I haven't heard any specific deals from Under Armour or Nike or any of that.
That's going to be his last official visit, though, right? Because he's been to South Carolina, Maryland, Michigan, and LSU for 4 already. So Oregon would be it then, right?
The thing that the article, let me pull that up. I'll clarify that. Yeah, no, you're good. I'll clarify that and just because I'm pretty sure it said 4th visit, but you're right. I think he has already taken 5. So maybe that was just oversight, or maybe I missed something. But yeah, so that's something to look at. I do think South Carolina is still in position here, but I put in a future cast for Harbor to South Carolina back in November, October, something like that. And I do think South Carolina really had seized a lot of momentum there for a second, and now I think it's a little bit more neck and neck. It's going to be kind of interesting how that plays
It's
out.
going to be a frantic finish for obviously a very important recruit on Shane Beamer's board going into February signing day.
So he did not make it to LSU.
Okay, so that would be that's my mistake then.
I actually reported that back then, but I had forgotten it. I think he had like a game or something that was a conflict with the date that he was going to go to LSU.
Okay, so Oregon, he still does have another official visit left after he goes to Eugene.
Yes, and that could be to LSU or, could be somewhere else. But yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. You can read that full article on the Insiders Forum right now, and I'll have it posted on the front page of Gamecock Scoop here shortly. There's a lot going on today, so but definitely something to look at. All right, let's talk bowl game. There is a bowl game in about...
There's a football game in Jacksonville in 27 hours-ish.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought the easiest place to start, for those of you that maybe checked out a little bit after the end of the season, are now checking back in because there's football happening again. There's several opt-outs on both sides here. I would say some at crucial positions for both, but maybe Notre Dame's hit a little bit harder. Alan, I don't know if you kind of have a list in mind for each team real quick.
Got a decent one put together.
Yeah, who's opting out for...
Start with South Carolina. You're obviously, we already hit on the tight ends, Bell in the portal, Stogner in the portal, Kenyon gone. So you're down to Nate Atkins, only Nate Atkins. They put the 2D depth chart out on Sunday, and you got 2 players to every position except tight end because there is literally 1 tight end left. So obviously there, secondary is going to be missing players. You've got Cam Smith and Darius Rush. They both declared for the NFL draft. Devontae Reed declared, but also was injured anyway, so you don't know which reason he's out. But either way, Devontae Reed at safety, he will not be playing tomorrow. So down there, you're down 3 in the secondary. You're going to be seeing a lot of DQ Smith, a lot of Nick Eamon-Worry, Kawan Banks probably. I wrote a story earlier this week. You can check it out. This was Monday, I think, first one I did here, about kind of those younger players in the secondary, your Keenan Nelsons. Beamer said does think Anthony Rose is going to play, which I think that'll be his first defensive snaps of the season. So then the secondary up front, down Zach Pickens. He declared for the NFL draft, probably gonna be a mid-round pick. And Gilbert Edmonds in the transfer portal. So you're down 1 interior and 1 outside defensive lineman. And then Marshawn Lloyd, obviously the transfer portal. So you're down to Christian Beal-Smith and Eugene McDowell at running back. Josh Vann is injured. Knee injury, he will not play. And we got confirmation today that Jalen Brooks also will not play with his off-the-field situation. So you're down a couple receivers there too. I think that's everything for South Carolina. Did I miss anything obvious?
No, that sounds right. And yeah, that sounds like a really long list. I mean, and a longer list than Notre Dame, but I think more replaceable pieces, perhaps than
I think
what
the
Notre
big
Dame
thing is, I'm going to get to Notre Dame in a second, but I think the big thing is Spencer Rattler is playing. Antoine Wells Jr. is playing. You got a connection. There is a pipeline in the passing game. You can do things against this Notre Dame secondary. I would say probably the 2 most important players on the offense are there. And that alone puts them ahead of Notre Dame, which you talk about their big connection this year. You had Michael Mayer this year, the tight end, probably going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. He had over 800 receiving yards. No one else even got to 400 on the Fighting Irish. He declared for the draft. He's opting out of the bowl game. And their quarterback, who started the last 10 games of the regular season, Drew Pine, is in the transfer portal. So they're going with Tyler Buckner, who has not played since he was benched after losing to Marshall in week 2. So not a lot of film there from South Carolina perspective on Buckner. He's played in 2 college games. But he's still there. And then on defense, I think this has kind of got under the radar because everyone's looking at Mayer and Pine, and rightfully so. They're excellent. Isaiah Foskey is Notre Dame's all-time leader in sacks in the whole history of that program. He was 4th in the nation in sacks this season. He's not playing in the bowl game, opted out the NFL draft. That is, I would argue, a bigger loss defensively than anything South Carolina is losing. South Carolina is losing more players, but you're talking about one of the elite edge rushers in college football, not just at Notre Dame, but anywhere, who's not going to be playing in this bowl game. I think that really helps South Carolina's offensive. Oh, speaking of that, Dylan Wonnum not playing the bowl game. He's going to be Tashawn Wanamaker at right tackle for South Carolina. I knew I missed one South Carolina guy. that I think about covers it. So I think the way I said it to you before we started, more quantity for South Carolina missing, but I think more quality, maybe more quality is not the right word, more important players missing for Notre Dame. Not to slide any of the guys out for South Carolina, obviously, but
I would
that's
say
kind of the way I see it stacking up.
Yeah, I would say more irreplaceable, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Because
There's no other Michael Mayer. There's no other Isaiah Foskey, and we'll see about Buckner. I don't think they have another Drew Pine there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with me, like, you think Zach Pickens, he's a pretty big loss because Notre Dame is pretty good at running the ball. That's what they're going to try to do, especially with a backup quarterback that, like you noted, didn't have the best success passing the ball in his 2 games before he got injured. He can run the ball a little bit, so, might even see a little bit.
I would think you're to see a lot of that, considering what we saw South Carolina not struggle or not do well stopping against Arkansas, against Florida, against Missouri. I think you'd see plenty of that.
Yeah, so you will feel the Pickens loss, but I also think you saw a lot of that interior defensive line grow over the course of the year. You saw Tonka Hemingway step up. Boogie Huntley seems like he's pretty healthy now.
MJ Webb.
Exactly. So I do think you have some depth in there that can kind of mitigate that a little bit. The Gilbert Edmond loss is confusing and interesting. Like we mentioned when he went into the portal, we're like, isn't he kind of set up to be the starter there for the foreseeable future? But whatever. So that'll be interesting to see if they can set the edge there without him. I mean, I know what was it? Brian Thomas Jr. got some action throughout the season. I'm sure he'll.
He's listed as a starter right now, opposite Jordan Birch at edge, and your backups of the 2 deep at least, take it for what it's worth, are Hot Rod Fitton and Tyreek Johnson.
And we've heard that Tonka Hemingway might slide out a little bit and play.
Yeah, he did that earlier this season. I think that there's a good chance he's played some edge snaps in this game.
So I do think you mitigate some of those losses, but I mean that's going to be a storyline to watch. Is can Ghana's front hold up against the run? Because I think the game plan, and this is something that you can read later on GamecocksGroup.com. We do a view from the other side feature, and we talked to Inside Notre Dame Sports. Yeah, and one of the things he kind of mentioned was like South Carolina, their game plan should be, and what I think it will be, is to sell out to stop the run and force Buckner to beat them with their arm. Now you're missing, Cam Smith, you're a little, and Darius Rush, so you're a little thinner on the back end than you have been throughout the season, but you have a lot of talent back there, and I do think that's the game plan. Although it won't surprise me if Notre Dame puts up some points in this one, just because it won't surprise me if both teams put up some points in this one, because both defenses are missing some of their better NFL quality players from throughout the season.
Yeah, I guess my thing with the passing game with Notre Dame is just, I mean, we talked about the numbers a little bit. They're pretty ridiculous how heavy the target share was, the workload. I mean, looking at it now, Michael Mayer caught 67 passes, and next closest was Lorenzo Styles at 30. Michael Mayer had 9 touchdowns. Nobody else had more than 3 on Notre Dame. Like, he was heavy. He was, I don't want to say the whole passing game, but he was kind of the whole passing game. I'm not sure how Notre Dame's going to be able to throw the ball to the boundary. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to really test the secondary, especially deep down the field. I don't want to say they can't, because they're not going to run. I'm not going to line up and run the ball 75 times. Like, they will throw the ball at some point. But I think of all the games to not have your top 2 corners, this is a good draw for South Carolina, I guess, so to speak, compared to some of the other possible bowl opponents they could have played. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it. So one name to look out for on Notre Dame, those of you that aren't familiar with Notre Dame's roster, I certainly wasn't, other than watching them beat Clemson, which, that was a fun night. But wide receiver Lorenzo Styles, he apparently had a big bowl game last year, but he's kind of struggled with drops throughout the year this year. And then, the 3 running backs are really going to be where the offense comes from for Notre Dame, or what they're going to try to do on offense, and that's Audric Estime. Did we say that's how you say it?
Estime, I think, yeah.
Estime, Logan Diggs, and Chris Tyree. Estime kind of leading that group there, and then, like I said, Buckner's going to run the ball a little bit too, so something to look out for.
There's 4 guys with legs here that could cause can cause South Carolina some problems here. You know, between those 3 running backs, you've got 17 touchdowns this year, like almost 2,000 yards. Like this is going to look style-wise, game plan-wise, probably a lot like what South Carolina saw at Florida, and a lot what they saw at Kentucky with Chris Rodriguez. So you've got one good data point and one bad one there. I feel like we've had this conversation about, okay, just stop the run, probably at least half these games this year. Even going back to the Georgia State game in week 1, that was kind of their identity too. Like, I feel like we're not breaking any new ground here, but this is a stop the run, you're going to win game tomorrow. I think we can safely say that.
Granted, Florida had a bit of a game breaker there with Anthony Richardson. I don't think Buckner is quite as skilled as that. I mean, he is dual threat, but I just don't think he has the ability to take over.
But not an NFL dual threat.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, let's kind of get more into how these two teams compare with each other. They're really kind of mirror images of each other in a lot of ways. We talked about this when we first kind of were previewing the matchup. Notre Dame is really good on special teams. They've blocked 7 punts this season. I know that Pete Limbo has gotten pretty animated as you guys have talked to him over the last couple of weeks about that challenge. They are pretty similar on defense in the sense that they haven't been dominant, but they tend to get things done. They play like a bend but don't break style, which is what South Carolina's defense is primarily done. And then offense, I would say South Carolina actually probably has the advantage on offense even before things, before the departures for Notre Dame. But South Carolina's been inconsistent on offense. Are we going to get the offense that showed up the last 2 games? Are we going to get the offense that showed up against Missouri and Florida? That'll be something that's kind of interesting to say. Who's calling plays, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think the mirror image thing you've got 2 teams that got better as the year went on is kind of the best way to put it. I know Notre Dame lost their last game of the regular season. They were on the road at USC playing a Heisman Trophy winner. Okay, but Notre Dame started 0-2. They're 8-2 since. They obviously had the win over Clemson. They beat a pretty good North Carolina team in their stadium soundly. They went on the road to Syracuse and beat them pretty soundly. It's a weird year. They've got 4 losses. They've got 2 ridiculous ones to Marshall and Stanford, and 2 perfectly fine on the road at Ohio State, on the road at USC. But you kind of say the same thing about South Carolina, right? Like, you lose to Georgia, fine. You lose on the road to Arkansas when they were healthy and kind of peaking, okay. And then you get popped by Missouri and Florida. So kind of the same deal. Obviously, the big ones over Clemson are both teams. I think the special teams point is really pertinent. We haven't gotten to that a lot yet. These are 2 of the top 4 teams in the country in block kicks this year. Got 13 between these 2 teams combined. Both sound in the return game. I know Marcus Freeman puts a big emphasis on special teams in general, kind of same way Shane Beamer does. I feel like Kai Kohler is going to throw a pass tomorrow. That's not too outlandish to say, is it?
So, I mean, we saw a lot of trickery, I guess, last year in the bowl game. We've seen it, in games where they felt like they had nothing to lose, like Tennessee or Georgia or whatever. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I know that I talked to Juju McDowell about him playing some Wildcat potentially, which, felt like a joke, Juju. But also like, yeah. I really do think that they're probably going to get creative. It seems like Beamer, I think he said this today in the press conference, like he's a bowl game dude. He really likes bowl games. And it seems like he, at least, in a small sample size that we've gotten so far, tries to have fun with it. It's an exhibition game. It is nice to win and carry into your offseason, but ultimately it doesn't matter that much. So it's like, why not open up the playbook and have some fun with it? And I do expect them to do that a little bit. I
think we're going to see the carry-on joiner being more involved. So A, by necessity, because you got Van and Brooks out, but B, he can throw the ball. He was 9 for 9 in the bowl game last year, right? Passing the ball. I think there's a good chance you see the carry-on joiner throw some passes. Kroger would be fun. And then there is, we're talking about the offense we hit on earlier. Is there going to be a second tight end tomorrow? Are they going to move someone over there? Do we think like Wyatt Campbell's on this trip? We've seen what the practices. Is that an option? He hasn't played at all this year, I don't think. What do we think this second tight end could look like? Or are they going to mess with it? It's just going to say one tight end or no tight end on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I did see that Beamer said something about basically like there's not going to be too many two tight end sets because I mean it'd be hard to do. It won't surprise me if they maybe bring in. I mean, you mentioned Tanaka Hemingway or Wyatt Campbell. Probably not to catch passes or anything, but just if you need an extra blocker in a short yardage scenario, something like that. I'm sure they have a package. Like I'm sure they still have a jumbo package of some sort,
Right.
that utilizes multiple positions that would be called tight end, but I don't know if they're gonna act as true tight ends other than Nate Atkins.
Your role, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I expect there. One more name from Notre Dame. Just I'm trying to give people some guys to kind of look out for on the field. Cornerback Benjamin Morrison. He's been Notre Dame's probably top secondary player. He's got 5 interceptions so far this season, although those came across 2 games. I imagine they're going to line him up on Antoine Wells. Antoine Wells is obviously the number 1 receiver for South Carolina. So I'll be interested to see what opportunities that opens up for other people. But also, I don't think
that who?
Wells is
that going to be Joyner?
Well, Xavier Legette's still around.
Who are the other people for South Carolina? Yep, Leggett will play tomorrow. It'll probably, when they go 5 wide tomorrow, geez, that's going to look weird in this game. But if they go 5 wide at any point, it's probably going to be Wells, Leggett, Amarian Brown. Who are they just blank? Wells, Leggett, Amarian Brown, Nate Atkins, obviously, and why am I? You got me. Dakarian Joyner. Duh.
Oh, yeah.
Joyner. That'd be your 5 wide tomorrow if they do that at any point, which I don't expect much of it.
It'll be interesting to see if we see any like Landon Sampson, who is highly rated.
Heard the name Omega Blake floated around this week. Some guys have been impressed with him. He's been practicing with the team. The Bulls, obviously, he's a walk-on. I rule nothing out, man.
I think
he's a scholarship. Okay.
Yeah.
I rule nothing out, man. I just don't.
Omega Blake's a red freshman out of Rock Hill. And then Landon Sampson was a 4-star true freshman out of Texas. So obviously at this point earned a redshirt year, but he could play in the bowl game without penalty. So be interesting to see if we see any of that.
Peyton Ingram, maybe?
Right.
Could he get a pass or two? He's on scholarship now. It's funny. Here's a name you haven't thought about since August, probably. You missed Chad Terrell right about now.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one of those tight end departures. Of course, he
maybe towards an ACL. He didn't leave the program,
right,
but yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how they piece it together. Probably see a lot of Juju McDowell. Christian Beal Smith, healthy, expected to play.
He looks fine. We had open practice periods, mostly stretching, but on Monday and Tuesday, CBS was out there. He's going through all of it. As far as I can tell, he looked fine. I don't know how many carries he's going to get. It's kind of the very short yardage back still. It's hard to work him in when you don't have Marshawn Lloyd, I feel like. He's just so different than Juju. It's kind of polar opposite backs. But as far as I can tell, he should be getting some carries tomorrow. He's still listed as a top back on the depth chart, the 2 deep this week.
Yeah, so with these 2 teams being basically mirror images of each other, missing some key players in spots, but, maybe. And again, I don't know that much about Notre Dame's roster. You're getting a backup quarterback, but you're getting a backup quarterback with game experience and a guy that had won the job coming off season. So, he's not a typical backup quarterback. He doesn't have, zero cred or whatever. We don't really know who was the backup tight end. We don't know who's going to step in on defensive line, on the defensive end for them. Probably not someone that's going to,
not their all-time leader in sacks in 130 years of Notre Dame football.
Exactly. So we tend to think that South Carolina's got better pivot options, I guess. But who's to say? All right, so let's get down to it. What do you think is going to happen in this game? Do you foresee this being close? Do you have a prediction one way or another on who you think might win?
I'll have my usual full preview running tomorrow morning on the website probably. I have a very hard time seeing this game getting to blowout territory either way. I don't think either offense is equipped enough to get up by 30 points. I don't, with what Notre Dame's losing in the passing game, with what South Carolina's, lost in the running game, lost with the, Jaheim Bell explosiveness. It's really hard for me to see a scenario where this game ends up 31-10 because someone exploded on offense. I think it's close. I think it's back and forth. I think it's going to be a special teams play or two. I do think South Carolina wins this game. I said this to you before we started recording. I said it to some other people today. When it's close, when teams are even, when they're mirror images, when in doubt, I'm going with the better quarterback. And I think that's pretty clearly South Carolina in this case, with Spencer Rattler over Tyler Buckner. So I think South Carolina wins tight, like 27-24, maybe like 28-21, in that mid kind of 20s range in a one possession game. South Carolina wins. I'll settle on a score prediction by tomorrow. But what do you have?
Yeah, I tend to lean that too. If I'm thinking about the matchups here, right? I do think probably we'll see some stuff on special teams both ways. But if we're thinking about who do I expect, what do I expect to happen? Do I expect Notre Dame to run it down South Carolina's throat all game long, and with them focusing on it, and South Carolina have no answer? Not really. That hasn't happened very often. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it hasn't happened very often. And then I look on the flip side, and Notre Dame's weakness seems to be big plays in the secondary. And do I think that South Carolina can make some big plays in the secondary? I mean, they kind of had over the course of the year, especially lately, that they have that ability. So I just tend to think that South Carolina is going to make more plays than Notre Dame is, if that's the way the game script plays out. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have the exact score. I do actually think both teams are going to score a good bit because of all of the departures on each defense, especially you got first-round draft picks on each side that aren't going to be there. Maybe like 31-24 South Carolina, something like that.
A little bit higher than me, but yeah, I think one-score game. I'm with you on that. I'm looking at the total. I'm looking for the total right now. I'm trying to see what this over/under is set at. Gauge the line right now is still Notre Dame favored by 2, which that hasn't moved like since the match, or Notre Dame by 3. I actually have here now. If there's a total at 50 right now, so that I guess my like 28-21 is just under that at 49. You're slightly over that at 55. I think that's about right. About 50-ish total points in this game. Did you want to hit on some of the decisions for next year now that we've kind of gotten the bowl stuff out of the way? Some stuff we've heard this week from players about 2023.
Yeah, I have a few questions about this week. Since you're down there in Jacksonville, you've been kind of interacting with the players. You guys get a lot of access, which is really fun.
Different. It's nice.
Yeah, I hope you guys have been having a good time too. It seems like it's kind of a cool setup. I'm sure it'd be even more fun if you weren't in Jacksonville. Sorry, Jacksonville, but you know,
it's
there's other destinations.
It's a pretty dead downtown by about 8:30, 9 o'clock. At least the night's so early this week. Maybe that's just a weird like between Christmas and New Year's kind of thing, but it's pretty empty.
Yeah, I'm sure this weekend will pick up a little bit. But
there'll be a lot of garden blackout tonight, I think.
Yeah, I did see those of you that are traveling to the game, traffic's already starting to back up a little bit. So, leave early, be patient, make yourself a good playlist, and enjoy the ride down.
Listen to the Gamecocks Scoop podcast. We got like a bunch of episodes from the whole season. You can recap.
That's true. Go listen to all the wins. Those are much more fun.
Yeah, just Tennessee podcast, the Clemson podcast, the Texas A&M one was a good one.
Yeah,
just pick and choose.
But anyway, so the big question is, are Spencer Rattler and Antoine Wells back after the bowl game? I mean, they did commit to playing the bowl game. Beamer did say anyone that's entering the transfer portal, he doesn't want to play in the bowl game. But the NFL draft stuff's a little bit more fluid. So what indications have you gotten from those guys about next year? And is there any other people that are kind of on the bubble there that you might have some insight on?
Yeah, so we had Rattler today. That's obviously the most important one at quarterback. He wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't make a decision, focus on the bowl game. Very, as usual, Spencer Rattler, diplomatic answers. I think the more interesting thing there with Rattler was yesterday we had Juice Wells, and he said he hasn't made a decision, but the quarterback's going to play into it a lot. That was the first thing he said when he was asked, okay, when you do make the decision, what's going to be the deciding factor? And like, you're kind of expecting to hear like, oh, my draft grade, Dowell Loggins. He said, no, the quarterback. That's going to be the biggest thing. I don't want to say Spencer and Juice are tethered to each other. Like if one goes, the other one will. If one stays, the other one will stay. I think that's how it could play out. I know they've gotten pretty close over the year. Obviously, they've got a great chemistry on the field. And I don't know if Wells wants to do the three different quarterbacks in 3 years thing between James Madison, Rattler, and then another quarterback next year. That's a speculation. I don't know. I think there's a chance that's how it plays out. And obviously, if Wells goes out and plays well in the bowl game and you're stacking, 11 catches against Tennessee, I think it was 9 and 2 touchdowns against Clemson, and then a bowl game, might be a better draft grade there. And then a couple others we've heard from this week. Xavier Legette said he expects to be back next year. He had a quote being like, he's got it all there. He hasn't put it together yet, which I think most South Carolina fans would agree with. So there's that. Jordan Burt said he has not made a decision yet. That's going to be, of course, a big piece in that defensive line with obviously Gilbert Edmond gone now. And then Javon Gwynn said he is probably gone. We might have touched on that last time. I don't remember, but he confirmed again that he's probably going to enter the NFL draft. So I think he'll be a day 3 pick probably. Depth offensive lineman, at least as a rookie somewhere in the NFL. That's all the guys we've heard from this week. I don't think anyone else has a decision to make that we haven't talked to. Am I blanking on anyone? Yeah, NFL-wise, not like portal or whatever, but
those were the names I was thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Birch, I think he could benefit from coming back for one more year, but
I do too.
Wouldn't be totally shocked if he doesn't either.
I don't know how he's going to grade draft-wise. He's kind of a weird prospect just in terms of talent, not so much lining up with production, but you see the way he tests and the kind of explosiveness he has when he can get off the ball. Like, it's a weird one. I could definitely see that going either way.
I mean, and he's had some like kind of jaw-dropping plays here and there. It's just not been consistent. So, and then with Rattler and Wells. So, I mean, just to give you the insider info or whatever, because that's what we get paid to do. We did hear several weeks ago that both of those guys were leaning to come back, but with the caveat that Marshawn Lloyd was also on that list. And then we saw what happened there.
I will say, again, could be wrong. I don't think that would be portal for Wells or Rattler. That'd be NFL probably. Again, could be wrong. Maybe there's some booster at Alabama who listened to the Gamecock Scoop podcast who's about to. Oh, Alan said that. I got you. I expect that to be NFL if they go.
Yeah, and we did talk about Rattler just like signed a new deal with Mercedes or like one of those car companies. So, that doesn't necessarily mean anything about the future, but he worked out something in the immediate present. So yeah, we'll have to see. Again, it is somewhat dependent on the bowl game too. I think if they both blow up on a national stage against Notre Dame, following up that Tennessee Clemson performance as well, then that is going to boost their draft stock a little bit. And there's a level that you could boost that to that it would make more sense for them to go. But if you're a South Carolina fan, it would definitely be nice to have them both back. And I think from a national perspective, South Carolina would probably be pretty hyped going into next year if they both come back. So
yeah, there's that angle too. Like we can talk about it a little, but like I've always had this theory that like if you ask a college football fan on January 1st what their team's going to be next season, and then you ask them on August 1st, the number jumps at least 2 wins over the summer. Like it doesn't matter what team you cheer for. I think that's just the way it works. You get hyped, you get the players in, you get through spring ball. If South Carolina wins this game tomorrow, at the end of the year, probably ranked in the top 15. If they let's say they sign Nicholas Harbor, you beat Clemson, you beat Tennessee, you beat Notre Dame, you signed your best class since 2013 on the ratings at least. You go into next year, probably ranked pretty high. Like the hype meter, whatever you want to call it, will probably be the highest it's been since like Clowney's last year, probably. Like it's gonna be insane. It's gonna be a long off season. It's gonna be insane.
I tend to think most people's predictions would hover around double digits for the win total next year, which is
frick, man.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's wrong or that you shouldn't think like that. What are you here for if not to dream big? I will only say though, don't base your 2023 prediction on what happens tomorrow in the Gator Bowl. Whatever you're feeling, like it's a weird game. There's players out on both sides. I don't think it says anything bad about this team, this season, or about next year no matter how they play tomorrow, in my opinion. But I can see how if you're coming to Jacksonville, you're spending money, whatever, you'd want to see a good showing tomorrow. And I think they will at least keep it close. Maybe they don't win, but it should be a good performance, I would expect.
Yeah, well, I mean, 1-0 so far in bowls for Beamer, and they had one of their better games of the season last year. So
That's actually a good point too, which we didn't have on our sheet. But Beamer with extra time to prepare. Eastern Illinois last year, fine, whatever. But what was it? Florida coming out of the bye last year,
yeah.
and then that was the game they blew up.
Texas
Got
A&M this year.
basically. Yep. Georgia State this year, A&M this year, and
Kentucky
North Carolina last year
because of the weird weather.
Kentucky with the hurricane game. So what does that put him at? 6-0 with more than 7 days to prepare for a game now at South Carolina?
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that, but that's actually a pretty good point that Beamer kind of has the formula down for situations like this, I think. And I guess Marcus Freeman, I don't know Notre Dame did out of there by but they lost their bowl game last year, which was Freeman's first game as coach.
Yeah, so another reason to feel good about our pick, right? So a couple more questions about bowl week. You did mention that 2023 class. One of the most underrated players in that class, I think, is Pup Howard, linebacker, at a position of need, right? Sherrod Green most likely is out of eligibility. I don't see how he wouldn't be. And then you have Stone Blanton, who, was a true freshman this year, got put in a tough scenario, but we'll have to step up next year. And then you got Pup Howard, and then, maybe they're going to try to address linebacker in the portal. I think they will at least
get Debo Williams too in the mix.
Yes, right. Debo Williams. But anyway, so Pup Howard has been practicing with the team for bowl practice. Have you noticed anything or heard anything from some of the players about how he's progressed? And very, very early on, right? Like he should be halfway through his senior year of high school right now, but he's practicing.
Yeah, he's 17 years old still. He can't vote. He's on that Gigi Jackson track. I actually asked Brad Johnson today. We had him at the presser at the stadium about, all right, you work with him closely. He's a linebacker. What have you seen? It was funny. First he goes, I don't know why they call him Pup. He's not a puppy at all. He's so big, which is pretty funny. And then he's like, he mentioned that Pup Howard, he used the word sponge, was what Brad Johnson said today, that he just learns really fast. He's picking up stuff. He's doing a lot of film study on Notre Dame, even though he can't play in this game, which I thought was very interesting. I don't quite want to use the term addition by subtraction, because I do think Sherrod has been in a brutal career with 2 major knee injuries. Brad, same thing. He's had his issues, 6 years. I think there's a chance they could be better at linebacker next year just by the natural progression. And that's nothing against Sherrod or Brad at all. But I think Pup Howard's a really good football player. I know we've had this conversation, I think, on this podcast. He's probably underrated, at least in the Rivals rankings. I think I think you kind of feel sneaky good about this defense next year. That linebacker group, obviously, Eamon Morgan, DQ Smith. You'll learn about some of these young corners tomorrow, probably. You probably feel pretty good there on your defense next year as of December 29th for the next meaningful game other than the bowl September of next year. But
yeah. And by the way, I'm not being critical of Rivals rankings. Actually, I look at the other rankings around the industry. I think Rivals is one of the more accurate ones, across the board. But if I'm looking at an individual that I think is a little underrated, I think Pup Howard might be a little underrated. So that, we'll see. But I do think he's immediately going to make an impact. We talked a lot about Nick Emenwari going into this season as becoming a name to look for and a name that South Carolina fans are very quickly going to fall in love with. And I think that proved to be true. So if we're going 2023 edition, Pup Howard is my freshman that is going to make an immediate impact, and by season's end, we'll have won a lot of people over. If those of you that pay attention to recruiting, seen him on Twitter, sort of, beating the drone for South Carolina since he committed. So I think he's got the personality to be a leader, even as a freshman, and the physical talent to make an impact pretty early.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, last question about bowl week. Who would you want on your Top Golf round robin team after going and seeing those guys play yesterday?
I think a few of these names. Kai Kroger, which that should surprise nobody. He's good at everything, but Kai Kroger was hitting nukes yesterday. Mitch Jeter, keeping it there in a pocket together. I think they call him bays at Top Golf, like 6 to a bay or whatever. Mitch Jeter was in that special teams group. He looked good. Colton Gauthier had a pretty good stroke. He's from Georgia. That's golf country. Makes sense. And Stone Blanton, actually. I saw Beamer kind of hanging out at his place for a couple shots. He was hitting pretty well. that's kind of my. I don't know if I need to force them. I guess that's kind of where I start. Based on what I was able to.
It's probably a good sign that your kicker and your punter are on that list. Then, like it's probably a good sign.
I mean, we've all seen Kai Kroger stick him at the 5-yard line all season. Like it should surprise nobody. He's got good touch on that stuff. That's kind of where it was a fun event yesterday. I really wish we could have seen like Cam Smith or Darius Rush play Topgolf. I feel like they might have had something to offer. Antoine Wells was rough. I'm not going to lie. I saw him whiff on a couple. Probably should stick to catching footballs, not trying to hit golf balls. Juju McDowell wasn't bad either. He had a few good shots too, which again, that shouldn't surprise anybody. He's pretty good at everything.
If you've never swung a club before, it's tough. I mean, definitely.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of guys there who hadn't. Yeah.
Especially if like you have ever swung like a baseball bat or something, I feel like that actually makes it worse because
It does. There were a couple guys. I'm trying to think of specific. You're kind of like holding it like a bat, and you're like trying to swing down at it.
Yeah.
I don't see Mark Kingston looking for any help there. Although we did. Here's a note. Stone Blanton said he's going to maybe go out for baseball in the spring. He was listed on the fall roster. He didn't play in fall bowl, I don't think, but he said he's going to have a sit down with Kingston. They're going to talk about it. You might see Stone Blanton play a little bit of baseball in the spring. That's one other bowl presser note that I had here.
Yeah, and that was something that when he was being recruited was talked about. So wouldn't surprise me. He's legitimately a pretty good baseball player. Was a high school prospect that would have gotten recruited on his own merit for just baseball. So anything else just from the week at Jacksonville? Like I said, if you go to Orlando, the team goes to Disney, all that sort of stuff. Have you heard anything about like the swag bags that they're getting, or just like?
No, I haven't heard that. I know they went to, which the media wasn't at this because you need like government clearance and stuff. They went to the naval base off the coast of Jacksonville. Everyone said that was pretty cool. That was a good time. Obviously, they had Topgolf yesterday. They had I can't think of what it's called now. Their community service event thing, which Notre Dame had one of those too. They're like packing boxes of stuff for food, or I can't remember exactly, but they had that. And yeah, it seems like everyone's having a good time. They're ready. And Beamer actually was talking about it today, when you mentioned he's a bowl game guy. Like you work hard all year. You spring ball, summer workouts, fall camp, 12 games. Yeah, have fun this week. It's a bowl game. You're not going to get stupid, but you're here. You're in Florida. The weather's warm. It was cold earlier in the week, but it's warmed up pretty nicely the last couple of days. Yeah, you should be here having fun, getting ready to play a game. And if you can win tomorrow, you can beat Notre Dame. That's even better. But it's a bowl trip. It's not Disney. It's not Vegas. It's not Nashville. We're in Jacksonville, Florida, but you can still have a good time here. And it sounds like that's what's happening.
Definitely. Well, for those of you that are watching the game at home tomorrow, we will have a live thread on GamecocksScoop.com in the Insiders Forum. That's always fun. Both Alan and I are kind of giving updates, but also our kind of live analysis of the game. Then we'll have several things breaking down the game, leading into it for the rest of today through tomorrow morning, and then stuff breaking down the game afterwards. We'll be back here early next week to talk review of the game and then start to talk about some off-season storylines. Hopefully we'll start to get some clarity on some of these players that are kind of the line or whatever, and kind of know what the depth chart's looking like and which positions South Carolina might target in the portal. The rest of the 2023 recruiting class, all that fun stuff. The offseason around here, isn't really the off season. I feel like it actually gets a lot busier in the off season. So
especially
with
stuff. February signing day now, and we got conference play starting in basketball for the women tonight, for the men, I think Tuesday. So keep an eye on that. And if you're into some of y'all I know like your history, you want to learn, maybe if you're younger. I wrote a big one of the last time South Carolina played Notre Dame. Talked to 4 guys on that team. They went to South Bend and they beat them with a big comeback. That's on the website at GamecocksScoop.com. Check that out if you haven't yet.
Yeah, my dad actually really loved that one. He was in college doing the education exam. He was a teacher for 25 years or whatever, maybe longer. Sorry if I got that wrong, Dad. But he said he missed the first half of that game and then like rushed home and saw them pull off the win there. So yeah, that was a really cool article. Go check that out on GamecockScoop.com. Until next time, this has been Caleb and Alan with the GamecocksScoop.com podcast. We'll see you.